Hello, everybody. This is Rahul, and this is our third podcast series. We welcome everybody. For all those who don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of AI Accelerate. We are a AI agent builder company, and today we want to talk about one of the most sensitive and important topic, which is security, privacy, and data protection. But this is my way of doing it. I have an expert with me who is a security and privacy expert. His name is Frank. So, Frank, I will pass it to you to introduce yourself because my audience probably has heard a lot about what we do and who we are and my background, but this is all about security, privacy, and data protection, where you are the subject matter expert. So, please introduce yourself and then we'll deep dive into what these topics are.
Sounds good. And thanks for having me, Rahul. Really appreciate it. Very important topic. I'm excited to talk about it. I am the founder and CEO of Xccelerate. We are a cybersecurity and data privacy firm, and we also help small and medium businesses make the most of AI technologies safely and harness the power of those technologies as well.
And, tell a little bit about your background in your company, Frank, to the audience.
Sure. So my background is a little over 20 years in this industry, in the field. I started at IBM. I was the head of IBM security. When I left, I spent a few years in the sort of pseudo private equity world, investing in cybersecurity companies and building cybersecurity companies from a financial standpoint. Last 10 years or so, I spent in the startup world, first leading a breach response and forensic investigation firm here in Dallas. In the last 4 years, we've been building and leading Bulling Security, which is a preventative cybersecurity firm that helps small and medium businesses essentially stay safe and secure and compliant and avoid the bad things from happening.
Cool, cool. And you guys are headquartered in Dallas, Texas?
Yeah, we're in Frisco, just
San
north.
Francisco.
Just north of
Cool.
Dallas.
Your neighbors, by the way. So if you want a combo package of AI and security, we both can come and visit your office if you're in Texas anyway. So thank you, Frank, for joining us and taking your valuable time. So let me kick off with this word, which I think is very practical and very much in the minds of every customer, which is the trust gap, especially in the world of AI, right? Cybersecurity is not new. Security is not new. This has been a decade, multiple decades old practice, which is becoming better and better. And I would say better or worse. Like every time security systems become better, hackers become better also. So I know that protection is the most important thing everybody thinks about at personal level, business level, and enterprise levels also. But we are going to focus a little bit on AI world. AI is a little fairly new for all of us when it comes to bringing it in the mainstream. Last 2-3 years has been the time frame where AI started taking off, and especially in the last 18 months, AI agents or agentic AI has become more commonly used as a word. People are figuring out that, but how does security and trust play in that space is what we're going to deep dive. So, why don't you comment on the trust factor? But I'll help you get started with few things as a questions from my prospects and customers, and that will give you a good segue of how to frame this word trust, whether the customers how confidently a small, medium, or a large business can trust these AI agentic systems from a security, privacy, and data protection point of view. So one of the common questions is it safe enough to put and give my corporate data to these agents? So that's the first question we commonly get. Then, where is it running? What about my customer information? What about my confidential or or intellectual property type of business secrets which we are training these agents. What if these things are exposed to somebody, or what if this agent trains and passes this information to the LLM agents and those things? So these are some of the uh, security things. There is a little bit of fear also. Fear is, hey, if I give full access to my systems, we don't know what these agents can do on their own. So that is also a little different topic, but these are type of questions we get. So this is on behalf of my prospects and customers. I have these questions. How do you frame it from your point of view in a short sentence?
Huh. Well, there's a lot, and you're right. The risk landscape of AI is quite wide, and we can get into all the different pieces of it. But if you were to look at it from a solution sort of preventative standpoint, first and foremost, I think most of the world is mesmerized by the current and potential capabilities of AI, and that's really where the conversation starts. Right? It starts with the excitement, start with the potential, start with what it's capable of. Interestingly, though, then it leads down a path of what can we do, how do we do it, but then what are the risks and concerns, and they usually end in three different buckets, and it's security, privacy, and data protection, and those are the concerns that sort of bubble up to the top. So maybe we can dive into those and sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
unwrap what those specific.
absolutely. And then you made a very good statement. It says it finally boils down to these three elements. So, however, the fear, how big and wide and unclear the fear might be, if the customer starts understanding these three key words and start becoming a little bit knowledgeable around security, around privacy, and data protection, all three buckets, they're all interconnected, in my opinion, to a certain extent. But that is our aim for today's podcast, is to educate our customers and prospects to say, how do we deal with these three things? What questions they should think about in their head and ask the right people before they make a decision to bring in an AI, implement an AI, or even make that AI strategy part of their business, right? So with that, I I'm saying the next three words are the big three keywords, which is security, privacy, and data protection. So back to you, Frank. How would you define these three words in the plain English? I know you can define it from a security and a technical standpoint, but our audience are small and medium businesses. These are business leaders. These are not necessarily technology leaders. It would be great if you can just put definitions from your point of view to educate me and everybody else.
Okay, so starting with security, right? So security is really about control before you get to the intelligence, right? So the intelligence of AI drives the capabilities. Security is how do you control it? Things like you mentioned earlier, Rahul, who can invoke the agent, which agents are allowed to run, what systems it could touch, or maybe even where the code, the actual LLM is running. And if you sort of stretch that definition, imagine you're working with Claude, for example, right, to build a completely new application. The source code that AI generates, that also has to follow some security principles, secure software development lifecycle, or perhaps it is full of bugs that can be exploited later. So security is sort of the bubble that surrounds control of all this intelligence. Does that make sense, Raul?
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. But let's try to keep it light for our audience to say. So you said control. Uh, you said bugs and code and what it writes. Let me ask questions on behalf of my prospects mindset, right? So if I am thinking about security, what are the first few things I should think when it comes to AI or AI agents in this case? And one of the common questions I get is, which one should I start with? If I'm in North America, if I'm a US or a Canadian customer, can I just go and trust OpenAI, Claude, Anthropic, or Gemini? because when DeepSeek launched, everybody freaked out. Like they freaked out to a level where, oh, this is a Chinese company. We should not even install the app on the phone. How would you educate them at the first place? Because I can tell one thing: everybody, including us, and in any corporate world, employees are using already some sort of AI chatbot. If not provided by the company, they're using it at their personal level. And this, I think, is an important information we should share with our audience, saying that how do you educate your employees for at least not using corporate data and putting it into a personal GPT or personal Claude, because that is not guaranteed that it will not train their model. So
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you sort of cross over into what is really at risk, right? So the example you shared with a chat AI agent like ChatGPT or Copilot, any of the chat agents, those agents are essentially exchanging data, input and output, right? So you provide data while the agent generates, some form of answer or response to your request for data. So it becomes really a topic of both privacy, protecting the sensitive information, but then also data protection and ultimately ensuring that the data that you provide or share doesn't end up in the training and the processing and sort of the mechanisms that ultimately disappear and allow leakage later on through some sort of exploitation. Bottom line is, in a chat environment, it really boils down to data and the user's understanding what is sensitive, what is not, and if it's providing it to the agent, there is absolutely no telling of where that data can be recovered, where that data can end up, where it can, travel in the future, and ultimately there needs to be some level of control to detect that sensitive data is being provided, and B, protect and retain that data in a safe environment before it leaves the organization and possibly, exposes either personal sensitive data or some secrets that the company does not want to reveal.
that's a good thing, and I'll try to translate that with respect to AI's point of view for our audience. The first one is, it is okay for you to chat with your personal chatbot, which is ChatGPT, on your personal account and these things, but do not push corporate data into that chat. So that's what Frank is saying. Chatting is one part. Agent is a different animal by itself. Agent has a little bit more things. Agent is supposed to be, by definition, autonomous, which means it can think. It has memory. It has connections to other tools and systems and these things. That's why, if at all you use any agents in your personal life, personally, do not ever give data to those agents, because, as Frank said, you don't know where the data is going to go and get passed, because it has those tentacles to go and exchange these things. So that's the first thing. So that's a good segue when it comes to bridging how our customers, when we are talking about AI agents and AI chatbots, if your company has Microsoft infrastructure, you might be already using Copilot to a certain extent. It is safe to chat and exchange certain things with the Copilot provided by your organization. If you are on Google infrastructure, then you might be familiar and using Gemini. In that case, it is okay to exchange data there, because it is still going to stay within the guardrails of your organization's admin controls. But if you're deploying an AI agent, then this is where we will jump into a little bit more, and what Frank just said. Choosing the right LLM or AI model is going to be important. In this case, my advice will be, when you are working with any agent builders, like AI Xccelerate, for instance, make sure you use your AI models and AI API keys. In this case, if you're a Microsoft shop, then you please stick to the Azure OpenAI keys, which is protected by Microsoft's privacy agreement for your organization. If you're using, if you're a Google house, if you're using Google Workspace for your listings, you can safely use Google Workspace Gemini API keys and it will still do the job. Or if you want to use a third party, Anthropic is very respected in the industry for its ethical AI models and practice. You can use Anthropic also. So that's how I would say, but it does not stop you to use OpenAI or anything else. There's nothing wrong with that. OpenAI is great, but make sure you pick up the right use cases to do what choices you make. These are commercial API, OpenAI. These are commercial AI models. But if you're very sensitive about not sending that from a privacy point of view, you can start thinking about the open source models, which runs only within your infrastructure, and that data will never leave your boundaries of your infrastructure. So this is just an advice from a choice if you have that questions around which LLM should I choose. So it depends on whether you're using general or whether you're using to build an agent. If you're building agent, then you have to be a little bit more careful. If you're using it for your employees, it can default to either Copilot or Gemini. So that was a good input from security, which is about controls and uh, how do you manage these things. So with respect to that, what is privacy and how do you define privacy and how that is extremely different than security? Can you just segue in that?
Sure. And Rahul, you made such a good point. I just wanted to come back to it with respect to using corporate agents and essentially API align your AI agents to those corporate licenses. What's important to note is a lot of the AI vendors provide license agreements that provide some guardrails around what is trained data and what is processed data, right? And if you purchase those licenses, like if you're a Microsoft 365 user with Copilot, you can restrict your private data from being stored and being retained in those LLMs. And that's a very important factor so that the users can freely communicate with the agents without the concern that the LLM will somehow absorb their sensitive information. However, still, I think the best practice is to have some AI governance best practices or AI use policy in place that at least educates the users on what are the do's and don'ts, what are the things to say and not to say, what are the things to upload and not upload, even when they have the licenses and the right integration and the safeguards in place, to still have the reassurance of the organization that they're doing the right things and that they're also avoiding the things that they shouldn't be doing and ultimately protecting the assets of the organization.
Let me ask you a little bit of a salesy question here. Is Blue Ink the right company to help organizations to define that policy also? Because I can tell you, being in that selling side, there are a lot of companies, I don't think they even have a nice document to say, hey, this is our AI governance policy document within the organization. Can they reach out to you for helping them to define that based on what should be their policy in general, but specifically around AI?
Yeah, absolutely, Rahul. And yeah, thank you for teeing that up. We help organizations build their AI policy, not only with respect to what they should and shouldn't do as users, but also how to follow the laws that are required for their industry, how to fit within the compliance requirements of their particular state or, again, industry. So our AI policy development goes beyond just prescribing what the users can and cannot do, but also helps them follow the law and make sure that any regulations that apply to their company or their industry are
And
also.
do you also help these customers with saying, hey, here is a little bit of an education content which you can circulate within your employees or conduct these kind of awareness or training programs for them to be aware?
Yeah, great. Yeah, great point. And this was not rehearsed. I mean, you're asking all the right questions, Raul. The point is, deployment of policy, any policy across an organization is always a little tricky, right? it goes through the chain of communication. HR sends it out, asks users to sign off and prove that they've read it. But it doesn't really educate. It just sort of forces the policy onto the user, say these are the guardrails within which you expect it to behave. I think with AI, it's important to couple that with training and education. So we do training along with the rollout of the policy. We also do that by role. So depending on how sensitive of data you handle with your role, so an executive suite obviously would have a slightly different flavor of that education than perhaps the accounting team and so forth, and then the general sort of population of the employees. So yes, there is education that goes along with it, which is absolutely the right way to roll it out. And then you can ask for the sign off at the end of the education without any friction.
Cool. So that is something which our audience can really reach out to Frank for those kind of things, because in a boardroom, it's not just required to have your strategy ready, but also how you execute and protect your company's data is also going to be very, very important. If you need some help, yes, Blowink is going to be available. Let's finish the third topic, which is data protection. Frank, how is this and what should be the context of thought process when it comes to AI agents? How does data protection play in this?
So it goes, like you said earlier, very much hand in hand with privacy. But data protection is really about keeping sensitive data away from the training and processing models, right? Or in general, leaving the organization without the right authorization. We use the term DLP, data leakage prevention, right? You've heard that as an industry term for this concept of essentially protecting that data and preventing it from leaking out. There are, and I know I used a couple different terms that may have been technical, the training data, processing data. Those are sort of AI terms that you may be much better positioned to explain. But
Sure.
From our perspective, the training is really the raw data, while the processing is the one that gets enhanced, the cleansed, the annotated, the structured, sort of the real quality actionable data that gets created from an AI model.
Yeah. So just to summarize how you put it across is everybody should at least be aware which AI systems they're deploying for their business on AI agents is consuming what data for training and what data is for processing, and they should be aware of that. So that's the first advice which I would say give it to us. Let me shed some light about what's happening when it comes to training data and so on. So generally, when we said don't give corporate data in your personal AI chatbot companies, the user agreement there is a little loosely coupled there, where whatever they consume to process it and give a response, that's called processing. But it also gets stored on their side, which means they can potentially use it for future training. And these models gets trained every couple of months. And that's why you see GPT 4.1, 4.2, 5.0, and so on and so forth. So every time they release a new model, they train these things, and your data could be used there. That is why it is very important when you're using business, when you're using AI for business or AI agents for business, it's very important that you use a corporate account which has very well written and drafted protection for the businesses on how that is used for processing and training. Generally, they will not use this data for training. So that's the first piece. So make sure that you don't choose a wrong LLM, which ends up going in the wrong side where your data gets used for training. So that's one. As far as processing is concerned, this is purely the output and input which is going in and out done by the AI. So that is the definition of processing. There is a lot of customers who ask us, are you going to train the models? We don't train the models, by the way. In our business, in AI Xccelerate, we are agent builders. We train the agents. We don't train the models. We use a fully trained model like OpenAI, like Anthropic, or Claude, or Gemini, and these things, and we just train the agent. And training agent means we create a very good curated knowledge base and store it in a vector database, which is a database which is very much useful for building that whole knowledge base and quick retrieval for AI agents. So the question you all should ask and know is, where is this data stored, right? So first of all, it should be stored in a place which you know, whether it is in your country, whether it is in your account of your hyperscaler, or it is running in your data center or on a personal machine. It could be anywhere, but if you choose to put it with a third-party provider, you make sure that at least it should be in your country and data center. Then it's a reputed company like Google, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure, or any other big, large provider who takes the responsibility to protect your data and so on. And finally, the all outputs generally is integrated from a privacy point of view. When it gets processed and it comes back to you, there is that stored and which all systems it is going in from an integration point of view. In the world of AI agents, it's all about two questions. Where is my training data stored, which is a knowledge base? Where is my output data stored? It could be in a SQL or any other storage. And finally, how many integrations this agent has, internal or external, and make sure that you know that before you sign off on building and deploying an agent in your organization. Cool. So we touched upon with Frank, we touched upon three key big topics, which is security, privacy, and data protection. This is the principal and founding pillars of whether it is cybersecurity for regular business or AI agents in this case. Frank, how is these three keywords or pillars associated with compliance? And compliance is a wide topic, but I've got a few names which I keep hearing: PII data, GDPR, HIPAA, and any other compliance. So how do we help our customers to wrap their heads around security, privacy, and data protection while any compliance which affects their business, but not limited to this? Is there any other thing which they should be aware? And if not, they can reach out to a company like yours who can help them guide and map that thing for you. So first of all, start with navigating through compliance and security and what's the relationship.
Yeah, and you're right. There are so many acronyms, and it's almost an alphabet soup to try to sort through all the different compliance standards. If I may do a shameless plug, we've published a compliance and standards guide, free, available to download on our website, blowingsecurity.com. So it at least sorts through all the various compliance standards that are out there to try to make sense of those. But I think the first question that everyone needs to figure out is what standard or a law or maybe a regulation that I need to comply with, right? So I need to understand the context of, is there a requirement that I need to comply with, really as a starting point, right? And then depending on your industry, these may already be defined for you. For example, HIPAA you mentioned, right? For healthcare, you're going to have to follow HIPAA, whether you like it or not. Depending on the state in which you operate or where your customers live, they will likely have sort of their own data protection laws as well. So I'd start there. So try to figure out the compliance and regulatory context first. But then in general, I want to show a certain level of maturity to my customers, right? You want to do the same thing, the company does. We want to demonstrate that we follow a certain high bar of protecting their information, our own information, and ultimately following security standards. So I would first, in the AI context, I would lean on the NIST AI framework as a starting point, which is a very solid, mature framework. Also ISO 4201, we talked about that previously. And in the EU, the AI Act, which was released at the beginning of the year, all are sort of formal frameworks or formal assessments of maturity. Now,
I've thought about it. How does that affect us here in North America? And is there any equivalent of EU AI Act within North America or in US?
not yet, in development, and there will be. I think much like what we saw with development of GDPR, the European Union sort of pushes the law a little faster. But I think we'll see something in the US that also governs the standards. Of course, ISO is an international standard, so it's applied across the world, but it is voluntary. So you choose to implement ISO 27 or 4201 as a way of to demonstrate your compliance. It's not enforced, as opposed to some of the European standards. Now, as I mentioned, that's in the absence of anything that's imposed. I think at the end of the day, what customers will ask, and whether they're large customers or small customers, is they want you to demonstrate what controls you have in place that prevent or detect, or if needed, recover any action that is not explicitly authorized by the users, or any sensitive information that is perhaps leaking to unauthorized places. I mean, at the end of the day, those are the overarching questions, and whether you use a standard to demonstrate that, or whether you have simply very credible and honest answers, I think end users and customers will appreciate that.
So if we were to guide customers in a hierarchy format in a sequence of what they should be first caring, does that framework which you just mentioned cover these things? For example, if I'm a business, I'm a manufacturing company, I should at least know what compliances apply to my industry and my state, and I should take care of that at the first place and always keep that in the consideration. Step two would be, it is probably not me. If I've taken care of, let's say, these two compliance which affects me directly, but now I'm working with providers like AI Xccelerate, like any other companies, they're buying software, they're using software, they're using data, they're sending data. It may not apply directly, but there will be some indirectly, they might be violating some compliance or policies. In that case, does your framework educate them of what they should look for when they buy AI agents, or when they hire AI agency company or a marketing agency company? Marketing is an afterthought when it comes to security, right? Like we just blindly say, hey, you are a marketing agency, come here. I don't think sometimes they discuss about security at all, and they start sending spreadsheets of data and this and that might blow up some big policy. So when you work with your providers, there should be some checklist of compliance and security, these things, and then is there anything else which, at least if these two are covered, does your framework cover these things?
Yeah. I mean, great point on also the third parties, essentially, right? Because you're engaging someone else to perhaps play a role inside your business. I mean, we've been talking sort of in the confines of our own house and our own standards and compliance that we implement as a business, right? But now there's a third party that's bringing a technology into our portfolio. So you would use a third party risk assessment to align with the risks that are acceptable to you with those third parties. But if your industry imposes that you must follow HIPAA regulations, for example, you would most likely impose the requirements and the controls onto those third parties as well, even though they're not in a healthcare space. They're a technology company, but they're serving you as a healthcare organization. So therefore, you would expect them to follow the same regulation. So there is a certain extension of your risk appetite to all your vendors and partners through third-party risk management. So that would be essentially the part of that standard or compliance that you would implement within, that you're managing your third-party risk the same way that you're managing your own risk within your own confines.
So I'll wrap up this point with two things. One is, if we take an example of a HIPAA customer wanting to deploy an AI agent, they should first see and check whether these technologies they're going to deploy is compliant some way or the other with HIPAA standards. That is the first thing they should do when it comes to enforcing. But let me ask my personal question to you, Frank. If an organization gets or has to enforce HIPAA, and let's say they run their infrastructure within a very tight control, and if they want me to deploy an AI agent, and if I say, hey, here is your AI agent, keep and deploy it completely within your control, within your Azure or AWS or local data center and everything, there's nothing going out. Is it safe for them to assume that the systems they're buying and deploying within their infrastructure, even if it is not fully HIPAA compliant, they will still not have any red flag, or whatever they buy and deploy within full control of their own still should be HIPAA certified?
Great question. So
we have customers coming in from healthcare. We have been doing our best to find specific components of our agents which is HIPAA compliant, but I'm just curious if even if it is not compliant HIPAA completely as a component of that AI agent, but if I deploy it in their data center, will that be enough, or they should not take that?
So your relationship with a HIPAA compliant organization, a healthcare organization, usually starts with a business associate agreement. That business associate agreement is typically a standard template. So it prescribes very, very standard requirements of a vendor that's handling or possibly processing your data. And so you will determine, based on that business associate agreement, whether or not you are actually touching and processing PHI, the sensitive healthcare information, the personal healthcare information, right? And that ultimately then drives to what extent you have to follow or conform to a HIPAA regulation, whether it is simply through an assessment of risk, and you follow the questionnaire and you make sure that you're ultimately treating the information the same way that you would be otherwise, or perhaps you have to extend certain additional security controls to protect that information if in fact you are handling and processing personal healthcare information. So sorry, the answer isn't a very clear and direct one. It kind of depends, but it's definitely an area where an alignment between what the technology can do and is doing with respect to sensitive information must conform and follow the HIPAA regulation for healthcare.
I would take one takeaway from what you just said is, at least if anybody is trying to work with us, or we are working with an HIPAA compliant customer, at least we should know, and the customer should know, that which part of the data is that sensitive data, which is compliant. If we don't touch that at all, we are okay with that. But then still alignment is required.
You still want to align and just make sure that
Yes.
overall there's an understanding, and I mean, ultimately through a BAA you're contractually committing to it, so you want to make sure that the implementation follows that contractual commitment as well.
Okay, cool, very good. We kind of touched a vertical industry, but let me then now ask you how these things with respect to general security, privacy, data protection, or around AI or AI agents affects, or I would say plays in small business versus enterprise business. And let's define small business. Anything which is, let's say, less than 500 employees, small to medium size is that. And
Sure.
then
Sure.
above that is a big, large company. So from your point of view, how much they can be ignorant or they should be or not, but everything comes back to how much the risk they are taking and how much that risk will come back and backfire at some bad time if it is not handled properly.
So, as you know, Blowing Security is in the SMB space. So we're, our market, our customers are small and medium businesses, exactly below the 500 employees for the most part. So we work with those customers exclusively. However, we also see the enterprise customers from time to time, especially when it comes to compliance specific requests. The reality is the smaller businesses, the small enterprises, I think are taking a much greater risk with AI because they're using it as a leverage, as a tool to go faster, as a tool to be more capable, in a way more unrestricted than you would see in a very disciplined, structured enterprise environment. So the small and medium business, and I think that's an obvious conclusion, but we see it in practice that small and medium businesses see AI as a tool to accelerate and scale and advance their business
Which is true also to a great
faster.
extent.
Right, right. And so I think the appetite is greater. The appetite for risk is also greater, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, whatever extra technology or tool you bring into your enterprise, it expands your attack surface. It expands your risk, regardless of how great and well developed that tool is. So with that, of course, comes the extra complexity of managing it and maintaining it and so forth. So we do see the adoption faster, greater, and maybe a little bit more reckless in the small and medium business space. The large enterprises, they come with a lot of restriction and guardrail around what they allow. And so I think you see a much more biased, examination of where the data is going, where the data is residing, where the data is being shared, what has access to what API credentials are using. I mean, you have a lot more granularity in the examination of the performance of AI tools in a larger enterprise than you would perhaps in a smaller one, which I think slows the adoption on one hand, even though I know we all see in the news how some large enterprises are moving incredibly fast and adopting agents and adopting AI technologies in general. But I think in practice, outside those examples, you see a slower adoption than you see with small.
I'm going to ask for two advices here from you. The first advice is, what is that advice to small and medium-sized businesses, which is up to 500, 600 employees, which you and I both target or work with? If they were to keep one or two things in their mind when it comes to deciding what level of risk, how do they make themselves aware? Just give that advice for small businesses. And then the second ask is, what will be your advice to a company like us who are building agents? We don't want to be reckless to give something which is putting our customers at risk. So how can we be a little bit prepared ahead of time so that we can tell our customers, saying, hey, by just choosing to work with us, if you are jumping in the AI game, you're already taking care a little bit of your risk because we are more sensitive and aware. So what is that advice to companies like us, as well as an advice to a small business who is buying these things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We touched on it, I think, a little bit earlier when we were talking about the policies, right? With an AI governance and acceptable use policy, you can enforce at least the discipline of developing the policy together with the leadership of your smaller customer to think through and to really evaluate the risks of what are permissible uses of AI, what are forbidden uses, what's the repercussions if you do, where the data is allowed to be stored, where isn't. So as you go through the exercise of it, it's not a very heavy lift, but going through the exercise of developing a sort of an acceptable use policy and maybe even AI governance, just to sort of have a process in place, who makes the decisions, how it's being monitored, how it's being managed, having those as a exercise. The document is great, that's the output, but having gone through the exercise with the leadership, I think is a very valuable, place to ease the comfort or improve the comfort of adoption. Right now, it's not sort of reckless. It's measured and it is as upon a decision. And at the end of the day, I think the users feel also much more empowered and enabled and sort of supported in using those AI tools, as opposed to, right, what we see, I'm sure you see the same thing, Rahul, a lot of the small, medium businesses, you have a whole bunch of shadow AI, right? This sort of term is widely used, same as shadow IT. People just use their own ChatGPT, their free account, or they use their free Gemini with Google. And so that's what you try to get away from. And instead of just making it a silent scenario direction, you make it very explicit and say, look, you can use ChatGPT. You can use your free version of ChatGPT, but only for these things. If you need a restricted sort of guardrail LM of ChatGPT, we do have a few licenses that are the business or team or whatever the restricted license is, right? And here's a process to request that license based on business use. And that can be incorporated into your AI, AI acceptable use policy. And now employees feel empowered. Leadership made that decision. Leadership accepts the risk of that decision. And so, on one hand, I think that's an easy bridge into a safe and responsible use of AI for our customers. I think for you, Rahul, it could also be something that you give as part of bringing your technology online, right? Is if you go into a small enterprise, say, I don't want you to just wildly implement it wherever you want it. Here's maybe a template to start with. Let's work on this together. Let's make sure that you make those decisions based on your business and your priorities or your risk tolerance. And by the time you start to implement our technology, you're going to know exactly what you feel comfortable with giving your users and what you don't.
That brings a good point for me. Let me ask you this. If a small business would like to get started with key documents, one is AI governance, AI acceptable policy or usage policy. What would be the third one in terms of security and this thing? Or is it just one, two? What is that list of things which they should start with, and they can come to you or they can come to us and I can bring you in and we can have that? And how long does it take typically? And does it take lots and lots of dollars, or is it something which every customer can say, hey, I can allocate this small budget for actually developing this document, this policy, and then socializing it within the leadership and actually publishing it to my organization, which makes them more confident, AI ready? Because one of the pressure with all the leaders, business leaders, is what do they do to become AI ready?
Yeah,
I think this is one of the important steps.
Yeah, and you want to shorten that bridge as much as you can, because this is all enabler. These are all enablers of business, and you want to be on the side of enablement as opposed to putting up the roadblocks and making it more difficult. So you ask a great question. What's the third document? I probably have third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So I could get carried away with the documents. But really, if it's just one, in addition to AI governance,
let's say if it's a bundle, right? So if it is an AI security bundle, if you and I were to launch this assessment jointly between both of our organizations for our existing customers, our new customers combined, because this is something which I think is going to be a topic forever. But if someone has to start that journey, what is that bare minimum package which they need to have, and what would that package contain?
I think every organization should have a general information security policy, just the standards that govern their use of technology securely. How they manage their infrastructure, how they manage their end users, what is acceptable use to be secure in the enterprise. I think that's sort of the baseline. And then, of course, the two AI policies would help bridge the gap into how much risk are we willing to accept, and how do we govern that risk across our end users and everyone else. We will. This is a future statement, but we will next month publish a template for an AI governance acceptable use policy free to our users. So that'll be available as well for download. And look, we play in a small medium business like you do, and we know that a lot of times our customers or our future customers like to self-help, like to download things, like to do things themselves, and maybe get started down a path and then ask for help later. And that's perfectly fine. And we're huge advocates of education and enablement, which is part of the reason why a lot of things that I referenced, and I say they're available on our website. We have this entire toolkit of things on blowing-security.com that gets you started with incident response planning, alerts notification, what were we talking about earlier? The compliance and standards, a book, which is a 45-page essentially document that outlines all the possible compliance standards that are available. We have a really compelling cyber insurance guide as well to sort of make decisions based on how you manage risk. So, point being, we will have a template of the AI governance acceptable use policy available on our website next month.
That's DIY. If a prospect or a company has to come and say, "Hey, I don't have time and energy to do my DIY project. Can you just come and help me?" What are they looking at? Is it a couple of days?
To do the work, I wasn't prepared to be on the spot, but it's an effort. It's a couple weeks of effort.
Couple of weeks
to develop it. I mean, we're talking small and medium business, so it could be anywhere from a couple weeks to the larger end of. If we're talking about 300, 400, 500 employee organizations, the larger ones, 6 weeks to build one. You bring the executive leadership together, you make some critical decisions, you make sure that it's aligned. And then, of course, it's the rollout and the education as well, which doesn't happen, in a snap. That's a process in groups. So all in, probably 6 weeks in a larger mid-market environment, a couple weeks in a very small one.
Cool. That's very helpful. So I think we will, when we publish this full episode, we will try to list down those links so that they can go to your website and download it and so on. And maybe in future we can build an agent which can answer these questions as Agent Frank for you, and then we'll see. With that, I would like to close this session with what and how we do as AI Xccelerate. We build agents to keep things simple for small and medium businesses. We have containerized all our agents into something called Docker container, and we can deploy this in your Azure, AWS, or Google, or any container solution, which means it can primarily sit within your controls. That's your security. We are specialized in CX agents, which is customer experience agents, which is sales, marketing, and customer success. So at the highest level, we don't touch extremely sensitive data, but we do touch PII data. So we do have clear documentation of what we touch, where we store, and how you can have the access to that, and what we do with that whole process, and how we bring a LLM agent, which is a commercial agent or an open source, but all of that can be deployed in your infrastructure. So this way, you can be rest assured that the agents which you're buying from AI Xccelerate is primed up for privacy, security, and data protection to a great extent. And then we obviously work through your specific compliance and in your policies. Some take long, some take short time. But yes, we insist on making sure that you are fully educated on how and what we do with our agents, where the data sits, how the data is used, and so on. So that's what we do as AI experts. So feel free to reach out to me. And if we cannot answer your question, we will bring in an expert like Frank from Blue Ink to help us out and help you out together. So that's how we build the agents. With that, I wanted to do a closing thing. So, Frank, what would be your one advice before you, or one final word or a statement for our audience from your point of view? And I will do the same thing from my side. In the world of agent, you can do the same thing in the world of security.
So maybe I'll make it a red flag. What's the one red flag, right? What is the one red flag that we look for when vetting any partners, AI partners? And that's, perhaps the most important is having the ability to explain, like you have in plain English, exactly what happens with your data, right? If you ask questions like, where's my data? Where did my data go? Where is it stored? Is it reused? Is it shared? Who has access to it? When do they have access to it? What happens if I ask for it to be deleted? And then you get these answers that are buzzwords, or trust us, we're complying with X, or some really complex technical explanation without a direct sort of, this is what the app is. To me, that's kind of the red flag. While on the other hand, the good partners, they're first transparent, right? You can very quickly find transparency or lack of transparency. This is what we have. This is what we don't have. And that usually comes from already thinking through those big pillars we talked about earlier, right? The security, privacy, data protection, right? They're already thinking through that. And so they'll bring transparency to revealing what is there, what isn't there. And that, to me, is golden when you're evaluating different partners.
Oh, I think that red flag should be the one which everybody should think. Ask those simple questions, which is, where is my data? Who has access? What does it do? Where it is stored? And if these direct, close questions cannot be answered with the specific answers, then you should be a little bit careful. Don't fall into the jargons of somebody who's trying to just be a sales guy or extremely technical, which cannot be explained to you what exactly it means. So I think that's a great advice. I would close it with saying, hey, AI agents is becoming mainstream, or it is already mainstream, let's put it that way. And security is not a barrier. You have to understand, evaluate, make yourself knowledgeable before you make a decision, and bring the agents in. AI agents can improve your productivity, reduce cost, increase business, but the fourth word I think we will add it is, it does come with a risk which should be understood well. How to mitigate that risk and how to control it is what I think is the output of today's podcast. So with that, I think it was a great conversation, Frank. I did enjoy. We didn't realize that it is almost an hour of conversation, but I think a lot more short content will come out of this. And I hope and I'm confident that our audience will love and enjoy to hear this long but important topic around AI and security.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Rahul. Appreciate the invite.
Thank you.